This time on Low Buck Garage, I get you caught up on a project I've been working on for a while. We'll call this the good tire. I made a bunch more progress. It generally went pretty well. Then you break the line in half. And then this happened. I found this listed really cheap. I didn't know what it was, but I had to buy it. It is a car body, but flipped upside down. And there you can see where the tire would be, and it all makes sense now. In the next video, I did a lot of work to it. Technically, the motor is in the car. After about a half hour of prep work, I decided it really wasn't worth doing anything more to this. That all went pretty smoothly. And welded up as though none of that ever happened. Amazingly, it all worked out and I was able to drive the buggy around for a few minutes. And we're done driving. That last launch took the tire right off the rim. Now I have this rim that popped off the bead here, but first thing, I'm gonna take a wire brush, clean off anything that's on this bead area here. Now what I'm gonna do is add some bead sealer. This basically is like rubber goop, and it comes with a brush and a can. Well, I'm going to slather it just all over here. Oh yeah, it's everywhere now. Probably supposed to wear gloves or something like that. Oh, that went on. A little bit of soap and water. We'll see where we're at. Yep, the spot right there. It looks like it's slow enough. It'll probably last for an hour or two easy. After my test drive, I realized this thing's a lot of fun to drive. But the other thing I realized is the brakes don't work at all. It couldn't even stop me from rolling on a hill. Now I know this rear end might be from a 48 Pontiac. I don't know what model. Looking up 48 Pontiacs, they have a lot of different bore sizes on the wheel cylinders, but the cheapest one didn't list what bore size it was. So I didn't even need to figure it out. I just bought the cheapest one. Looks right. The new wheel cylinder did fit. It looks physically larger than the old one, so it's probably a bigger bore size. That's okay, especially since I'm only working on rear brakes right now. I can use more fluid to move, but it'll actually create more pressure, so I'll have stronger brakes in the rear for now. Then maybe I don't even need to get the fronts working at all. Gonna hit the pedal, see what happens. Oh, it's moving. I now have brakes. Oh yeah, and the transmission I had put in originally didn't have a reverse gear. In another video, I tried to fix that problem, but it didn't work out very well. That's not going to work. I did come up with a solution, but involved another transmission swap. Bring her in and tear apart this properly working vehicle. And then I got distracted. But now we can pick up from there. Now I can put this transmission that I stole out of my Jeep into this buggy. Eventually, maybe they'll both run at the same time. It'll be around there somewhere. There we are. Just gotta bolt it all together. There we go. Got the transmission mount all bolted in. Previously, I'd thrown a boat gas tank into the area where the passenger seat would have been if there had been one. I'm gonna actually bolt something in the vehicle this time. I even splurged and bought something shiny. So we're gonna pop this on the back. And it looks like I can bolt it right to the top of the trunk lid, which is on the bottom. Yeah, I think that'll work. Now I'm running this line real close to the suspension link. This just pivots, but I'm gonna use a piece of electrical conduit hold down. It's not touching anything moving at this point. There's some gas in the tank. Time to test the fuel system out. We got fuel pressure. Let's see if it still runs. Haven't started this in a long time. Got my button. Bad connection. Probably. Let's try this again. I stole the seat that was in this for that double dually truck. So we're going to add some boat seats with a temporary mount. This looks fine. I think we're ready to drive it. And for the first time since I've owned it, it drove backwards. And then there was an issue with the steering. It had a little bit of a pause to it. I noticed an issue with the steering in the last test run, so I figured I'd take a look at it. It appears this tie rod end is hitting, because it doesn't really seem attached particularly well. That arm is held on by these two bolts. Looks like I can just tighten them up. Let me see how deep these go. Alright, looks like the holes are deep enough for the bolts. I'm going to use the high strength stuff here. Now that feels rigid. I think that's fixed. While I'm in here, I might as well figure out what wheel cylinder that is. That could be handy to know. Maybe even replace. Something there should probably tell us what this is. I noticed there's two different bore sizes. That's kind of interesting. And an arrow pointing forward, which means that shoe actually has more pressure than this one. Because with a bigger bore, with the same PSI, there'll be more force pushing on that shoe. Kind of a neat idea. Got a hit in that part number. It's a late 30s to mid 40s Ford wheel cylinder. So these brakes are, looks like from a Ford, maybe half-ton pickup, something along those lines. And the best part is, you can still get these parts, brand new, and they're cheap. I paid less than $14 for a brand new wheel cylinder. And brand new hose, $5 and change. So less than 20 bucks for everything I need to make this brake work, I think, hopefully. Here's the lines from the master cylinder. Goes to a T-fitting right at the rubber line. I took off the rubber line and the T-fitting is wet. Let me show you what happens when I press the pedal. All right, pressing the pedal now, pumping it. Got a nice firm pedal with no line attached. Even though that's wet, fluid's not really coming out of it from the master cylinder. So I got to dig a little deeper here. I'm running a piece of coat hanger in that metal line. That's most of a coat hanger. Let's see what happens when we hit the pedal now. So I'm going to use this jumper wire to hold this in position. Jumper wires do a lot more than conduct electricity. And that's full brake. Ran an old choke cable through. That far so far. Still haven't got it. So now I'm going to try to go from the zigzag end. One thing you can do is actually straighten the bends, which makes it easy to run through, and then you break the line in half. There apparently was where the clog is. Also, it was rusted to the point where it was too weak to hold together while bending. But now I'm going to go buy a new line. Got the new steel line installed. Ah, we have movement. I think we got brakes now. We got brakes on all four wheels now. This electric fan is the one I had bought to drive that 53 Kenworth bus across the country. Now, I've never been a big fan of the stick the plastic through the radiator style mounts, but I don't actually have any good reason for that. It just seems weird, but they seem to work. The fan also came with a real basic control system, which is just a relay and a temperature sensor. Now this sensor grounds out at a certain temperature. I don't know what it is. I'm hoping it's somewhere in the 180 range. When this grounds out, it triggers this relay and that turns the fan on. I've got a block-off plug here in the manifold in the coolant passage. Whoa, hey, hi. Apparently that was under pressure. Now the interior of this buggy is pretty functional as is. We've got plenty of ventilation, easy draining, variable adjustable seat. It's basically good, but I want to refine it just a little bit more. I found that having something under my feet that prevents them from hitting the ground is nice. Sometimes the variable adjustable seat isn't quite as sturdy as I want it to be going over bumps. So let me take out what's here. And this is what I have to work with. I got two cross members I added. This one I could attach if I felt like it. And then some pieces that were here from before. Looks like the bell housing is about 30 degrees. That's a good place to start. Now when you're working with bending tubing, there's a lot of math you can do to figure out the lengths right. But a lot of times it doesn't matter, because the bender needs a certain amount to grab before you bend it. That extra length is probably going to be trimmed off. So I just set it for the end of the bender, bend it whatever, don't bother measuring, and trim it to length afterwards. The furthest forward point I want to mount is this cross member. The furthest backward one is that one. So I'm just going to make a diagonal between the two. I'm looking at 28 inches here. Now I know the end of this bend is somewhere near the front, and then I want to go to wherever the back is, which I just measured at 28 inches on the diagonal. I'm going to make my first trim there, and then I can trim off either end to make it fit finally, once I get it in place. So now this piece is going to go roughly in this area. If I want to change my mind, go to this cross member. I just trim off that end. We can just sort of play with it as needed. I'll just eyeball it. Taking the seat and both of those rails right to it. I kind of guessed at the position. If I want the seat adjustable, I'll just drill a few more holes and I can move it forward and back if needed. This one doesn't look half bad. I like it. Shift lever's gonna have to move though. I'm trying the wet towel method of welding. Hopefully I don't burn any holes in that seat. The seats are mounted, so now I can start finishing up the floor here. I've got these rails I added that are nice and straight, and there's a clear path all the way back. So I'm thinking of making this floor in sections to make it a little easier to work with and easier to put in and take out if needed. Now these are 15.5 inches across, and they're about 50 inches. I was digging my pile of not too rusty metal, found this piece, which happens to be 15.5 inches wide. It's 48 long. It's not quite up to the firewall, but that's where the bell housing is, so I already got to do something different in that area. So I think this is a good starting point. Now the other thing about it, this is about a 1/16 of an inch, so 62 thou or so. That is way thicker than you need for a floorboard. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Because where I'm putting it, it's going to cover up the transmission that's not strong enough for this engine, the U-joint yoke that's held in with glue, the drive shaft that has bits of random drive shaft and exhaust pipe making it up, and a rear end from a car that had way less power and might explode. So that piece would be extra thick, covering all this stuff that could potentially go flying apart. So I'm okay with the extra thickness. That's a good spot for it. I'm going to start my measurements right on the inside edge there and measure forward for one dimension and measure from the side for the other dimension, and anything I need to put in, like this transmission shifter cutout and the hole for the transmission mount and all the transmission stuff, I can measure from these datum points and lay it out on my piece of metal. The absolute first thing you want to do is make sure you know which way this is going to go in. So now, anytime I measure something, I know where I'm measuring from and I can get my dimensions where I want them to be. I won't have a chance of having it mirrored or flipped over or something like that. 32 from the back. I'm showing 6.5. It might shake side to side a bit, so I'm going to go to 6 inches to give it a little bit of clearance. We're at 5.5, so we'll go to 5 inches. We'll measure up to here, give it about 1/4 inch on the front, because I don't think it's going to go front and back very much. Now I'm going to use a straight edge across, which is just a random piece of metal, and I'm going to go forward until it looks like I hit. So right about these brackets is where it comes up above the level of this surface. We know to cut there at 37. All I have to do is cut along the lines and it should fit close enough. Radius corners. I wonder if I could repurpose this cutout to go here. Something like that. Just added a piece of 1-inch strap there. Let's clamp these pieces together. I bent that piece, I rebent these to match it. I think I can weld the whole thing together and be done with this. figure since the seat has a gray insert, I'm going to paint this floorboard gray, and hopefully it won't be quite as hot as if it was black. Maybe I should brush some of the dirt off. Yeah, good enough. I'm using lots of bits of square tubing to make up bracing this floor, and I'm going from tubing to C-channel. I cut the piece too long. I put it up against the tubing I want to attach it to, and then underneath the channel I want to attach it to, and make a line right where it meets the channel. Then where the line is, I make a slice in the tubing. So now I've got a notch in the tubing here, right where the flange goes. And then when I put it in place, I've got this side butted up against the tubing and weld around it. This side sits on the flange, and I can get a good bead here and then some underneath too. Went the extra mile, did some fancy masking. A little bit of rattle can work. And now our framework kind of matches the wrist. I cut a couple squares of expanded metal to fill in where the feet go. It's starting to look like a car. Now I have protection from all the explodey bits underneath, ventilation and sand filtration so the inside will be easy to clean, and seats, 2 of them. So I can have a victim ride with me too. Now boat seats aren't nearly as sturdy as car seats. They flex quite a bit. So bought muffler clamps. Now these are not sturdy enough to hold up the seats. I'm going to run a bar behind the seats. These will be in compression, so they will have almost no force on them at all. All I have to do is locate the bar and everything's fine. I just chopped off a piece of 1x1 tubing, popped some holes in it, roughly where they should go, I think. And then the seats will hit that brace. So I'll still be able to fold up the seats to protect them from the weather, but they'll be nice and sturdy in use. Came across this. Haven't seen one of those in a while. Good thing I lost a washer, I never would have found it. This interior is really coming together now. I'd like to have a dashboard. That might be the next thing I work on. Found a piece of leftover material, and it looks like it's just enough to make a dashboard. Not quite at the edge of the body on this side, but real close. There's a little cutout that's going to leave a little bit of body left. But I think that's close enough, it won't really be noticeable, and then I can use this piece of material. So I'm going to call that good enough. Just have to trace where the dashboard needs to go. Got it pretty close. I can finish it off with a belt sander. Getting there. Now I've got to attach that dash panel, and at some point this did have a dashboard, and there's some holes all the way around for it. One of them has a screw broken off in it, and that gave me an idea. I got a nice dent to locate my drill now. Found some fancy looking button head cap screws at the hardware store. So I'm going to tap all the holes in here for the 1032 thread. If you ever do this with a tap, you got to make sure you go real straight, otherwise this could break easy. A lot faster than doing it by hand though. I'm going to take a cheap old Phillips head screw with the same thread. Now I got a point on the end with the right thread. If you ever need to hold a screw in a drill and you don't want to mess up the threads, just put 2 nuts on it, tighten them against each other, and they lock on the threads. When you take them off, the threads are still good. I can thread this in with the point sticking out, and I got my punch mark where I can drill through. So everything should line up perfect. Now I've got all these nice dimpled holes exactly where the bolts are. All I have to do is drill them out and they should line right up. Now one nice thing about having a dashboard that you made is when you make it, it's out of the car. And you can assemble it while it's out of the car. And that makes it a lot easier to work with. because it's not in a car. I really hate working under dashboards. These two with the black needles are from an old Jeep project. They actually came from India and were less than 10 bucks a piece. This Sun Pro one was the cheapest voltmeter I could find that kind of matched, except an orange needle. I think that was like 13 bucks. And I got a tachometer for like $28 that hopefully works. After a few miles of cheap wire loom and a lot of time, I think I have a working dashboard. I have one main switch that basically turns on everything, and then a switch to give an extra ground to the fan, so that'll turn on if the sensor doesn't work. I put in a headlight switch, but I don't have them wired in yet, just the dash lights and a starter button. And that's it. Battery's hooked up. First thing we should hear when we hit the ignition switch is the fuel pump. Yep, it's running. We got fuel pressure. Fan. Electric fan is working. I can feel the air in my legs already, so that's moving some air. That sounds good. I think I need to reattach the exhaust and stuff, and then we can fire it up. Hearing a weird ticking sound from in the engine. Power's off. It sounds like it heated up and is cooling down. Lifter's pumping down, maybe? I do not know. If anyone has any idea what that might be, please comment. It's a lot easier to ignore it if I know what it is. Definitely sounds like it's coming from the cam area. I had the exhaust system off to do the brakes. I think I'm gonna do a little bit of paint on this too. This is a shiny stainless steel muffler, which I want to leave, but I didn't have a coupler that was stainless steel, so I just used mild steel. So I'm gonna mask it here and paint that end. Got some header paint on the non-shiny end. If it wasn't for my really bad welds, this actually might look decent. I want this shift lever to go that way. It's bent down here where it mounts in the transmission. I'd rather not modify that. I'd rather modify the lever because that's easier to replace if I get it wrong. Maybe a little more. I'll just weld it back together right there. Got my zigzag made. Yep, I think that's good. Found a universal rubber shift boot on eBay, even with a fancy little chrome bezel. Seeing how there's no roof, this will help keep water out of the transmission. There we go. Kind of waterproof. We'll call it water resistant. It's like a duck. I've got my battery here. I've got a stop on the front to keep it from moving forward. The body will keep it from moving backwards, but I want to sort of hold it in place from wiggling. So I have a tie down, an actual one, not even a bungee cord. I cut a piece of angle and drilled holes right at the edge. I'm going to run this on the back side here, catching this edge and the top of the battery, and pull it diagonally. So that'll pull it forward and down at the same time, and the bolts themselves will keep it from moving side to side. So I think this will be locked in place pretty well. Here's the issue with the floorboard. I have it all here covering up things nicely. Then I hit the throttle pedal. Yeah, it hits the floor. I need to make a cutout here so that arm can pass through the floor, and I'll leave most of it there, but I'll just take out a section. We'll call that fixed. Now, thanks to your guys' comments, I know these pedals are from a 58 or so Ford truck. I was able to buy a gas pedal a while back, but I had trouble finding a pedal pad that was reasonable. Finally found one on eBay for $6. So that is my price range. There we go. Got a full set of pedals now. I'm gonna actually try to get all the leaks out of these rear tires. Got my usual soap and water mix. Ooh, we got bubbles already. First place I sprayed. We basically have a bead leak on the entire bead on this one. All right, so pretty much these beads are terrible. This side isn't as bad. Mostly leaks in that area and that area, so only about half the bead. Apparently, we have a bead that doesn't leak. Oh, a little bit. Not too bad though. We're going to completely ignore the back side of this one. We'll call this the good tire and fix the front side first. Now the problem I had before was my old bead breaker wasn't wide enough to fit these rams in it. I got something new now. The people at Vivor sent it to me. I actually had shown this in another video, But then they got kind of mad at me because I kind of made fun of one of their other products. I'm just going to use them for something more suitable to their weight rating. This one I like. There's two main steps to operating this. There's a little gripping finger, and that grabs your rim. And then it has three little pointed legs, and that's what breaks the bead. You put an impact on it, and it pushes down this leg, and that's what pushes your bead away. So this part's on your rim, that pushes the tire away, and it breaks the bead nicely with that. Now a lot of different companies sell these. Vero is actually the cheapest when I got this one. And so far, it's worked great. I've actually put this through a lot of use, and it's held up fine. And with this, it doesn't matter how wide your tire is. Now the bead's broken all the way around. I'm going to leave the tool installed so I can get to the edge and clean that up and try to seal it. One other word of warning, they will mess up the paint on your rims. So plan on repainting after using this tool. Gonna put a nice thick layer of bead sealer on here. Good thing this comes in a big can. Resealing the bead didn't go nearly as smoothly as last time. So I gave more power a shot. But still no luck. Gotta get a little more serious about smoothing these out. There's a few spots that are pretty chunky. Chiseling off the big chunks, and we'll go in and smooth out the rest. Got it a lot smoother. Definitely into the golf ball range now, so fairly smooth. I'm gonna reapply the bead sealer and hope this actually works this time. It's just sliding right on. Put the core back in there. Apparently that rim is just shoe size. I put it in the sun to get the rubber a little more flexible, cracked and dry as it is. Let's see how we did. Oh, not very well. Now that failure was my good tire. This one's leaking on both sides. The other problem is that was not particularly fun. And that means I was doing it wrong. I'm gonna find a different way to fix this tire that's less annoying than when I had to fix that tire. Now it's common knowledge that tire sealant will not fix a bead leak. You pump the tire sealant in, it goes around the outside of the tire, it only seals up punctures that come from the outside of the tread area. But I don't know if that's actually true. It's meant to be installed in this orientation, and then the tire spins it out. Wonder what happens if you try to install it sideways. Now I have instructions on how to use this stuff. I should be pumping 32 ounces in and then driving the vehicle. I'm going to do neither of those things. This is a 1 gallon bottle. That amount seems about right. There we go. That looks like just about enough. Hey, actually added air pressure. So now we've got a big pile of this goop at the bottom of the tire where it's not leaking. Now I got about 15 psi in there. And it's leaking profusely. So now we've got to get that sealant to where the leaks are. And hopefully, as the air is oozing out of this tire, it picks up some of that sealant and shoves it in along with it. Let's see if we can just make an easier way to rock it here. Oh, there we go. We'll just slosh it around. I don't see any spots leaking. Now I let these sit for a couple hours. Looks like we're in good shape. You can tell by the way the cracks in the tire are expanding, it's still holding air. So that's ready to install now. Though once I put these tires on, that gets a lot wider. So I'm gonna pull it out of the shop here, put these on outside. Gotta remember, this one wheel is left-hand thread. Everything else is right-hand thread. That's not confusing at all. Yep, holding weight. everything is working well. Having brakes in reverse is handy. I've been working on this for a long time, and it's gotten quite a layer of dust on it since I painted it. We're going to do a quick wash, try to clean this up a little bit, make it a little shiny. I kind of think this car deserves it. I'm pretty happy with how this is turning out. Now I got it a little bit cleaner. I'm going to put on a few final touches, like a charging system. I've got an alternator here. This is one of the Magnum series engines that was computer controlled, so the alternator used to be controlled by a computer, but we're just going to run it manually. I showed you this method before, so I'm just going to kind of gloss over it. You know, the field wires here, output to the battery. I used some old trailer wires, so I had a green and a brown connector. And I'm going to a standard Mopar voltage regulator. So standard that the box even says standard. It's a VR125. And I popped a few extra dollars for the matching connector. On this truck, I just used bullet connectors. And that works fine. The voltage regulator even came with the instructions on how to wire it. But basically, there's two wires on the connector here. They go to those field terminals. And the center one gets a power lead from the ignition. And that's it. That's all you do. The blue wire going to a field and a power. Really doesn't matter which way you get the field wires. The green wire going to the other field wire. So we just plug this in. Now we should have a charging system. Power on. We got a charging system. Now one other thing I noticed when I took this for a test drive is that I almost ran into stuff a number of times. So I'm thinking seatbelts are in order. Luckily, I have some 4-point harnesses lying around. They actually came as part of the deal when I bought that seat used, but I'm not going to use them in something that was walking speed like this covered wagon. Now, this originally came with lap belts. The holes are there for that. We just got to do something about the overhead straps. Now, I want to preface this by saying I know this is not a particularly sturdy way to mount seatbelts. This would not be safe if you're in a road-going car. I'm only driving this thing off-road. Not planning on going particularly fast. I also don't expect there'll be any traffic where I'm driving, so really the seat belts are mainly to keep me from bouncing out of the seat. Just some 1x1 square tubing. It is getting some U-bolts to hold it in position. I do have to worry about the strength of this roll bar, and it's wobbly. It really doesn't matter that I don't have a particularly strong mounting method. The thing I'm mounting it to is also not strong. It kind of balances out. I also have these eye bolts on the back side. And mainly that's to take up extra length because these straps are a lot longer than I need. Totally the wrong way to do this. Now this car is ready to go for a spin, but there's one last thing I gotta do. I gotta add a tracking device. Now this isn't for the car, this is for you guys, because I bought something. I really appreciate the way you guys have been supporting the show by clicking buttons and liking and subscribing or whatever it is you do to make YouTube work, and putting up with those annoying non-skippable ads. So I wanted to reinvest a little bit and try to make the show a little better. This is a solo shot robotic cameraman. It's supposed to automatically move to follow this tracking device. So this thing should turn and point and zoom and all sorts of stuff to make sure the camera's always pointed at this device. These things are crazy expensive new. I didn't buy it new. I found a good deal on eBay. It was missing parts. It came to me with the touchscreen broken off. I had to reassemble it a little bit to get it working. It seems to work now, and we're gonna try it out. I just have to make a mount where I can take this in and out of the car quick and easy, and it stays there when I go over bumps, because I already lost it once. Now this needs to have a signal to the sky because it's got a GPS in it. So I'm thinking I can take a piece of foam where I can cram it in there and attach it to one of these legs pointing upwards. Yeah, we'll trim about that much. I think that'll work. The fan kicked on automatically. Nice. Well, that was a blast. That was so much fun it should be illegal. And it might have been. I probably broke a noise ordinance here or there. Scared away a little nature or something like that. But that thing goes. I didn't even think about getting stuck anywhere. Every time it started to dig into the sand, I just hit the gas and just drove right away. So it does fantastic off-road as far as going. Riding in it leaves a little to be desired. These tires, as dry and cracked as they are, you'd think they'd be fine, but they're not very flexible. That was really bumpy. Also, that is way too much engine for this car. It only makes power at high RPM, and you can't get there for very long unless you're in a big straight sand area. Engine that was close to stock would actually probably be a lot better to drive and just as fast, because I couldn't get on that at all. A few things I want to change sometime in the future, but that's it for this video. Hope you guys are having fun too, and we'll see you next time.